A few years ago, in one of the intensive cares I've worked in, we had a patient whom I'll call Bob. For weeks after undergoing surgery, Bob was confused and often aggressive. It was so frustrating to care for him. Not only was he incoherent and uncooperative at times, but his physical condition was worsening despite our best efforts. Good day. My name is Sandy, and this is Sandy's Sessions. I'm an RN with over 30 years experience in critical care. Realizing that there's a lack of knowledge around delirium in both the general and medical communities, I've developed this series of videos to arm you with the tools needed to help your loved one affected by delirium. I'd like to welcome you to our first video in the series named Confusion in the Hospital. In this podcast, we'll go through the definition of delirium, the difference between dementia and delirium, and why it is so important that you, as a trusted loved one, be involved in trying to reverse this frightening medical condition. Here comes a disclaimer. The information shared in these videos is for educational purposes only. It is not medical advice. Please consult with a qualified medical professional before carrying out any of the suggestions shared in these recordings. So back to our story. I finally decided enough was enough. Someone had to take responsibility for helping Bob escape from the grips of delirium. Bob had already been delirious for weeks. The sooner one recovers from delirium, the better their chances of getting back to their normal life. I volunteered to be his primary nurse, which meant that I would be assigned to him whenever I was working. Embarrassingly, like a lot of other doctors and nurses, I knew very little about delirium, despite it being theorized that approximately 30 to 80% of patients in intensive care, 20 to 40% of patients on other wards, and up to 50% of patients in long-term care experience delirium at some point during their stay. I already knew firsthand that a person affected by delirium can cause harm to themselves and others, but I've never even thought about the fact that delirium often leads to longer hospital stays. Experiencing delirious episodes increases the chances that one will require long-term care, and older persons affected by delirium are at higher risk for developing dementia. Unfortunately, being affected by delirium is associated with a higher risk of dying within months after being discharged from the hospital. So what is delirium? Delirium is a sudden change in the brain that causes the person affected to become confused. It's thought to be caused by a disruption in the signals between the neurons, which are the nerve cells of the brain. Helping Bob through his delirium became a team effort between the doctors, nurses, dietitians, physiotherapists, and most importantly, the person he trusted most, his daughter Julia. Julia came to visit as often as possible, relieved some of his anxiety by attending to business that he was concerned about, brought in photos of people and events that were familiar to him, and clothes he felt comfortable wearing. Being a person he trusted, Julia helped anchor him to reality. She convinced him to accept necessary medical treatments, questioned whether her father needed other treatments that she felt might not be so necessary. She proved to be a real comfort to him. Julia shared information with us about Bob's background, which included that, as far as she was aware, Bob didn't have a history of dementia. And what's the difference between delirium and dementia? Delirium develops over hours to days, while dementia develops over months to years. Delirium is fluctuating, meaning it is associated with wild mood swings, while people with dementia tend to have more even moods. Delirium is considered reversible. Dementia is not considered reversible. As an aside, if someone you know has been diagnosed with dementia, you might want to get a second opinion from a gerontologist, who's a doctor that specializes in the care of older adults. So, lessons learned. You now know that delirium is a sudden change in the brain that causes confusion. It's different than dementia, and it's important to have someone who's familiar with the patient on their team. Wondering what happened to Bob? After several more weeks of working with Bob, the team was thrilled to see our hard work had paid off. Bob had gotten well enough to be transferred out of the intensive care. I have to make it clear that despite our best efforts, it's not always possible to rescue someone who's been taken by delirium, especially if they're at the end of their life. At other times, you may be the beacon that leads your delirious loved one out of the fog. If you found this information helpful, please hit the like, subscribe, and notify buttons so others who need help can find us. Until next time, stay sane.